Yeah, can I just ask you, I lost a great jumper yesterday, and I noticed that this great jumper, which is not mine, was left behind, so somebody might have taken my great jumper. If you have a great jumper, check.
And there is this one here.
On attend le deuxième intervenant. Ils sont deux intervenants et Marcus doit arriver.
Le deuxième parle d'intervenir.
Non, le deuxième qui intervient avec lui.
Ah, c'est un double aussi. Ah, double aussi.
Sinon, on peut commencer par Marcus.
Ouais, c'est vrai.
Mais Marco, c'est trop bien.
On peut le remplacer.
Je ne sais pas faire patienter les salles comme le vacant qui fait comme dans un match.
That's all the program.
2:40 on the program. We shouldn't respect the program and stop now because it's written 2:30 on the program. It's written 2:30 on the program. So
Why not switch over the second?
no, but I mean there are other people who are
And Marcus is here.
still around.
Okay, we win.
Oh, yes, Marcus. Okay. Okay, sorry, because we decided to begin the meeting in advance because there is a dinner today and there is one speaker missing this afternoon, Lucie Dumont, because she lost her grandpa. She couldn't come. Still prefer to keep on the time. So yesterday we talked about institutionalization. This morning we talked about internationalization processes. And now this afternoon we will examine the questions of circulation patterns, of theories, methods, paradigms, and also key thinkers. So our first speakers are Patrick Baer, who is from Cambridge and who is a partner of the project, with Marcus Morgan, with postdoc Interco in the project, and they will be speaking about the case study of the reception of structuralism in English studies in the United Kingdom.
Yes, thank you very much, Giselle. I'm going to speak first and then Marcus talks next. So we are focusing in our research on a number of case studies. One is the import of existentialism in France in the 1940s. Another one is a case study we will be discussing today. And there's a third case study coming on the influence of existentialism on some aspects of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa in the 1970s. So these are the kind of case studies we talk about. The first two case studies have led to two books. The one is the one we're going to discuss today, which is Conflict in the Academy, which I can show you a bit later. And the other one on existentialism is coming out in a couple of months with Polity Press. Now, in our presentation, Marcus and I will explain the research that we carried out as part of this work on H4 and which culminated in this book here, which I mentioned. So I will provide a brief outline of what we studied for this book and why we studied it. And I will also explain very briefly the theory underlying it. And then Marcus will elaborate on the research itself. Now, we were particularly interested in the mechanisms by which ideas from one country become adopted or not adopted, as the also interested in how ideas from one discipline manage to affect other disciplines, or not, as the case may be. And we were also interested in the conflicts that erupt around these attempts to import from other countries and other disciplines. And so the in-depth case study which we focus on here is about the conflict over the refusal to give somebody tenure in the English faculty in Cambridge in the early 1980s. The person involved was a young academic. His name, he's still alive, but his name is Colin McCabe, who had spent some time in the 70s in France and who drew on French theorists in his work. What's the problem? Okay. And who drew on French theorists in his work. Now, of course, now that kind of enterprise is part of the orthodoxy of the study of English literature, but in the Anglo-Saxon setting, and especially in Cambridge, in the late 70s, early 80s, this was way out. This was far worse than what some people could imagine could happen in academia. Now, so he didn't get tenure. As the debate unfolded on this, because there was a conflict obviously over this, as the debates unfolded, the influences on him were often referred to as structuralist, mainly by his opponents. Now, we don't see our case study as a straightforward reconstruction of the import of structuralism, because the use of the term itself, with all its pejorative connotations in England at the time, was a strategic and methodical tool in the conflict, especially by those opposed to McCabe. And likewise, the notion of a foreign import was sometimes, is it not working?
Sorry, carry on if you can.
Likewise, the notion of a foreign import was sometimes used as a strategic move, especially by those who did not want McCabe to obtain tenure. So it's not just about the import of ideas or structuralism, because the very notion of the label of structuralism was part of the conflict, as we tried to show. Now, when we talk about not obtaining tenure, because he did not obtain tenure, this is legally speaking not correct, because the Cambridge system at the time was different from the tenure track system in the US, but it's close enough, so we're not going to go into the legal details. So quite a few, it's important to note that at the time, quite a few academics in Cambridge did not receive tenure. And so McCabe was not alone. But the McCabe case stood out in two ways. First, it was not clear that the procedures to arrive at this decision about his tenure had been followed properly. And this created a substantial amount of discontent. And secondly, more importantly, unlike in the other non-successful cases, the McCabe case turned into a media event, partly because he had connections in the media. And so newspapers and magazines were reporting on it. And most significantly, as a result of this turmoil, the university agreed to organize a 2-day discussion of the state of the English faculty in the university Senate House. And so the dramatic scene of the Senate House gave the impression that the faculty itself was on trial, and the suggestion of a court case gave a remarkable intellectual and political platform for both the antis and the pros, the people against McCabe and those for him. But the trial, if we call it as such, in the Senate House, quickly turned into a debate about the study of English and English literature, about the existence of a canon and what a canon consists of. It also became a debate about structuralism, or indeed any kind of theory. And it also became a discussion about the import of French ideas into the UK in general. Now, as for the methods that we employed, we studied the Senate House discussions, we studied the media interventions, and we also studied the minutes of the faculty meetings. We also interviewed the major players involved, for instance, McCabe himself, and somebody called Rix, who was one of the main opponents of McCabe at the time. Unfortunately, some of the other people involved died, in particular Frank Kermode and Raymond Williams, who were amongst the strongest McCabe supporters. Now, regarding the theory that we used broadly speaking, but a light touch theory, a positioning perspective. So this meant that we were particularly sensitive to how the intellectuals used in their interventions in the Senate House and in the media to ascribe characteristics to themselves and to others. These were often carefully crafted strategic moves and counter moves. And we also drew to a considerable extent on the theoretical insights from cultural sociology, but we tended to deviate from the Yale School because we decided it was necessary to also analyze the material and broader historical factors in order to make sense of the performance. Now, speaking of which, three factors played a substantial role in this conflict, which I need to explain very briefly before Marcus talks about his stuff. Firstly, the institutionalization of English as a discipline occurred relatively late in Cambridge at the beginning of the 20th century. By the mid-20th century, a consensus had emerged over the type of method that should accompany the study of English literature. The central figure here was somebody called Levites, who advocated a humanistic perspective, and indeed several of the people against McCabe were people who had aligned themselves with the Levite perspective. Secondly, in the course of the 1960s, the social sciences gained ground in the UK, and a modest institutionalization also took place in Cambridge from the 1970s onwards. Scholars in English literature started incorporating insights from the social sciences. This was the case for Raymond Williams, for example, and this sat uneasily with the earlier humanistic perspective of the study of literature. But it also changed what was regarded to be a legitimate study object of study. So the notion of the canon now was no longer secure. Neither were the boundaries between English literature and other phenomena. And thirdly and finally, the new intellectual currents in France, which were often described as a shorthand as structuralism, fitted well with the emerging social sciences. They jarred, on the whole, with the humanistic perspective of the earlier period in the study of English literature. So structuralism often became a code word for the import not just of foreign ideas, but of the social sciences, and also for the possible dissolution of the unified subject, whether it is the reader or the writer. So it is against these factors that this conflict was played out. And you've got now your PowerPoint.
Yes, good. I'm sorry for distracting. So, as Patrick mentioned, there are kind of two parts of our analysis in the book, and the first half of the book is more material, more institutional analysis, but what I'm going to focus on is in the second half of the book, which is a very small element of the symbolic analysis that we do. So So we started this part of the analysis from the assumption that the pure fact of McCabe's failure to get upgraded was simply that. It was merely an empirical occurrence without any significance in its facticity one way or another. And this can be shown by noting that many other assistant lecturers throughout the university had failed to be upgraded in the past, even at exactly the same time when the McCabe affair was in full swing. There were 2 other assistant lecturers within the English faculty. One of them eventually made it to a permanent post, the other one didn't. And not much of a fuss was made in any of these cases. So this raises the question, we argue, of why and how a controversy ensued in the particular McCabe instance. And if there's one thing for certain, it's that a controversy did indeed take place. This, as evidence of that, this is just a few clippings from one national newspaper, The Guardian, but it was covered in all the nationals. It was obviously covered in the local and student press. It even found itself into international weeklies. It was on the TV, it was on the radio. So for a short period, the libel cases were taken out. For a short period of time, around the winter of 1980 to 1981, there was a big explosion and storm around this. So in order to answer this question of why and how a controversy took place, we draw, as Patrick mentioned, upon American cultural sociology, but critically we draw upon it, to argue that facts can't speak for themselves, but rather facts need to be told or narrated or positioned in a particular way in order for events to acquire symbolic meaning. So from this perspective, facts only acquire meaning and become more than mere facts once they're coded in meaningful ways and positioned within culturally comprehensible narratives from which they derive their significance. Additionally, we also draw upon cultural sociology's suggestion that a symbolic hierarchy exists within which such facts can be told or positioned. And this hierarchy in cases of dispute and conflict and controversy stretches from these Durkheimian poles of the sacred and the profane. The idea is that narrating 5 minutes. Oh God. I literally just I'll go along and then you can tell me when to start. Narrating facts at the more profane level of this hierarchy signals that whatever's occurred has done so within continuously and tacitly functioning higher norms and values. Whereas narrating or telling or positioning facts at the more sacred level of this hierarchy suggests that norms, or at an even higher level, collective values have been brought into question, and therefore that crisis may be at hand. We suggest that this telling of facts is performative, since it's aimed towards bringing into being some meaningful social reality that wasn't present before. In other words, the strategic telling of facts didn't merely reflect the way that the world was, but actually was aimed towards bringing into being new kinds of reality. One obvious way in which the antis evoke the sacred was in reference to English literature itself, and the practice, or rather a particular kind of practice, of literary studies. This strategy first relied upon constructing the canon as a totem for English literature at large, in other words, a core collection of works that provided a coherent representation of the primary and sacred objects of the discipline. And secondly, the defence of a particular established method of literary study that Patrick's referred to as humanistic literary studies. So some evidence of this, and most of these quotes, apart from the Ricks quote, which comes from an interview in The Guardian, come from this 2-day discussion that was held in the Senate House. Rather than reading those out, you can read them yourself, because it seems to be in a rush. Anyway, from these quotes, we can see that there's an implicit moral load being placed on English literature. And this is of interest because it exemplifies one of the most common rhetorical tropes in the fracas. And that was the remarkably frequent appeal to higher, often universal concerns above factional or personal interests. So such claims to be acting on behalf of something purer or more universal than personal gain or petty retribution obviously draw attention away from whatever partisan moves might simultaneously have been going on. From a structural perspective, we see this description of a motive as base as always relative rather than absolute, and this kind of draws on Douglas's analysis of dirt as the prototypical pollutant. And the idea here is that what we think of as an absolute terms as dirt is, in fact, better understood as simply matter out of place, which once placed in another context doesn't become dirt. So you might want to think about manure when it's placed in a flower bed, obviously isn't a pollutant, but when it's placed in your own bed, it becomes a pollutant. There were plenty of other contexts within the university and elsewhere in which the charges of self-interest or personal gain that made sense as forms of corrupting bias and appointments considerations could be considered perfectly acceptable, even laudable motives. We might want to think about the sports field or exam competitions. So it was the context, not the content, that made them polluting. Looked at in this way, one element of the symbolic struggles that took place within the McCabe affair can be understood, we argue, as laying claim to contingent purification practices, so to reorganising the environment of the faculty so that appropriate interests were functioning within their appropriate contexts. English studies, the antis argued, was the discipline that most defined the national culture, and the Cambridge School of English, at least in their eyes, defined what the study of English in general should mean. This meant that the symbolic environment was arranged in such a way that the antis could position any threat to Cambridge English as not only a threat to the local practice of English studies in Cambridge, but also a threat to the discipline at large, and what's more, an implicit threat to the national culture itself. 2 minutes. I'm trying to get to a kind of overall conclusive point, but this is a bit difficult. Anyway, in this manner, the emotive momentum and symbolic weight of the affair quickly snowballed, rapidly assuming proportions well beyond its local effects in terms of whether this individual, Colin McCabe, was going to get a permanent post or not. As the affair proceeded, this threat also became increasingly associated with and condensed into a single catch-all term, which was structuralism, which, in spite of repetitive protestations that it was absolutely of no relevance or value to the debate whatsoever, participants and commentators seemed incapable of ceasing to use. The term was frequently used as by the antis as a simple epithet, aimed at stigmatizing their opponents. And as a label, it therefore became quickly imbued with a host of normative rather than simply designatory meanings. In this manner, it served as imprecise shorthand for everything the antis believed was wrong with the kinds of work that they saw McCabe and others to be supporting. As one commentator put it at the time, it became the term that the business-as-usual faculty majority chose as their omnium gatherum definition of the enemy. In this particular case, however, in order for this stigmatizing strategy to work, the term itself needed to be repositioned as, in fact, the pollutant that the antis wished to claim it was, and more specifically as one threatening to the kinds of literary study that we suggested the antis were intent on sacralizing. And is that it? Maybe you can ask questions.
The problem is that I went slower because of the confusion.
Yeah, but I took it into account.
Well, you get some sense.
Yeah,
We asked a question. I extended it. Yeah, sorry for but there was some technical problems. So thank you very much for this presentation, which I think emphasizes the importance of the context reception and the strategies of import or rejection of foreign references. So for this question,
you started with this symbolic analysis, very interesting, purity, danger, classic stuff. The problem I see with that is that it's such an abstract way of putting on the nitty-gritty that we don't have the actors, we don't know their position in Cambridge. We get most of the part of your talk about, purity, danger, it's kind of universal thing that we can put on any object. So now that you have more time for developing, I would like to know more about, call it the nitty-gritty, but what were the interactions, who are the actors, and because yes, purity, danger, but more concrete thing than abstract thing that can be applied to everything.
Can you be a bit more specific? So you want to know the nitty-gritty of the actors involved. So I suppose
Are they 5?
Colin sorry? Oh no,
Are
no,
they
no,
3,
no.
5, 7, 5 in the academic? The evolution in the media, how it came out in the Guardian through McKay, because there's some.
This is something I couldn't. One reason why the Guardian picked it up so much, and I'm aware that I'm on camera, and Colin Kay is very sensitive about this, is that I think he knew someone very well in the Guardian, and he was more or less sitting in their King's Cross offices telling them. So that's certainly one element that unfortunately couldn't be put into the book. So in some sense it was kind of contrived as a controversy itself. But in terms of the main actors, I think Patrick mentioned some of them. Colin McKay was clearly in the middle of it, but he was away on some British Academy lecture tour throughout Europe whilst it was for this couple of months when it was really raging. So the main actor.
He took the phone to call the guys, or what?
I think he was calling them. He was phoning them up, and he was quite open about this, but he was also quite certain he didn't want me to write. The main actors, Raymond Williams, on the side of these groups that we've called the pros and the antis. So if you take the pros as those who wanted to make an inquiry into the conditions surrounding his failure to be upgraded to a permanent post, and the antis as those who just wanted to close it down, move along, pretend that nothing had happened, or it was all just water under the bridge and we can all forget about it. So in that camp, the prominent figures that you might know their names would be Raymond Williams and Frank Kermode. And then in the anti-camp, I suppose Christopher Ricks was probably the most famous literary critic that was in the anti-camp, but there are also others.
I mean, the pros were concentrated in 2 colleges, because English it's a huge faculty, so you have quite a presence, not one fellow in a college, but you might have quite a few. So you've got sort of intellectual clusters of like-minded people to some extent in these colleges. And so Jesus College, King's College, that's where the pro-McKay people were. And for example, somebody, as a consequence of this, left Jesus because he was an anti-McKay person and went to another college just to show.
Thank you very much.
Jesus was right side.
Thank you. Other questions?
So it was structured by local institution and environment to a very large degree. Sorry.
No, Jesus was on the right side.
Yes, and former students of Jesus, like Terry Eagleton, who had then moved to Oxford, were writing articles in support of McKay. So it was, even if they weren't in Cambridge, their connection to these institutions still had a reverberation.
And so the pro-McKay people were also people who were preoccupied with bringing some insight of the social sciences into the study of the institution, which that's what was the earlier. And the anti-McKays there was quite an anxiety about what they saw as declining standards amongst the students. Because there's also a period subsequent to the increase of student numbers from different social classes. And so there was an anxiety about, can these people write properly? Will structures not corrupt the way in which they need to be able to learn to write English?
Yeah, that's one element of the explanation is definitely post-Robbins boom, and quantity of students and different kinds of social classes, I think, coming into elite institutions.
Yes.
That's definitely part of the story.
And in fact, that was one of my suggestions, that with what you're explaining now, personally, I think it's much more explanatory than staying in the clouds of purity and abstract, because then we didn't know anything. It's okay to do it, but then we have to come back to what you just said. Yeah, in 20 minutes you have to calculate the right thing, so sorry.
Other questions?
In fact,
Do you want,
I think the irony is, of course, that in a way what he was doing, and he was extremely prolific, but what he was doing, it became the orthodoxy in the study of literature 2 decades later. But at that point, in the precursor of my own faculty, something similar happens with somebody who tried to bring Foucault into the study of social psychology. I forgot his name. But he also, he's prolific, but he also was not too interested to go somewhere. So I think he ended up in Amsterdam or something, which was a bit more.
Another strong element is this national element, the France England thing going on.
Yeah.
So do you feel like there was
It's
a
kind of
rivalry
developed.
with Frankfurt? A rivalry?
What's that, sorry?
Yeah, I think there was
a rivalry?
Yeah, rivalry. I think there was an anxiety. Definitely, you could see in the debates of the people who were against me. They exhibit an anxiety about the canon, about what the subject is about, and there's certain canonical figures like Shakespeare and Jingles or whatever it might be. And secondly, also slightly defensive move, sort of concern about all these things that are happening abroad and which might eventually undermine the nature of the subject, which was relatively young, because in Cambridge the classics curriculum was the dominant curriculum, and so English was a very late arrival.
And was there a relationship with the import of this structurism in the United States, or was this totally disconnected? Did you find some
People in America were writing on this, were commenting on it at the time.
Supporting, writing in to support McCabe.
Yes, writing in support of McCabe. And also there was one thing that Raymond Williams presented this lecture to the faculty whilst it was going on, and what he tried to argue, which is perhaps a dubious argument in terms of the facts of the actual argument, but it's interesting in terms of the kind of symbolic manoeuvring that he was up to, was that practical criticism, when Richards left and went to the States, went to Harvard and then came back, his ideas coming back via France, he tried to make an argument that this, looking at the internal structure of a poem was itself a form of structuralism avant la lettre. So he's trying to draw structuralism closer rather than this is going back to the Puritan intention, rather than push it.
Yeah, so try to argue that basically it was an indigenous.
It was an indigenous thing that's,
and so therefore, so in a way what you see in the debates is that the values and the categories to which they refer, whether they're pro or contra, actually quite similar.
Okay, is there any other question? No regrets? Okay, so in this case, thank you very much. Okay, so now we are going to hear a different case of circulation, which is about Gramsci. So Marco Santoro, who is also our partner in the INTERCO project from the University of Bologna, will display the global circulation of Gramsci.
Well, thank you, Giselle. This is the title of the paper. That is, I underlined the subtitle. Very first step. This is research that we are just began the research 3 months ago, more or less, and we are. Myself is Marco Santoro and Andrea Galelli, who is not here because he has just become father, and but he is co-author of the paper and of the part of research that we are doing. I don't understand how to move with this.
Yes, we've written for some reason.
Okay. Well, we start from the beginning, which is indeed the end of a life, which is the life of Antonio Gramsci. He died in 1937 while in prison, so it's just after prison because he was seriously ill. And the first book authored by Gramsci has been published in Italian in 1947, so 10 years after his death. His famous letters from prison, and really letters to his family, his wife, sister-in-law, and sons. In the year, 1 year later, in 1948, was the first book drawn from the notebooks, Quaderno del Carcere, which is the book for which Gramsci is most famous. And in 1951 was the sixth and last book drawn from the notebooks. Then, and it is just a chronology, very important point, in 1975 the critical edition of the notebooks, still in Italian. And this is indeed our real point of departure from a theoretical research point of view. This today, we all know, is the Gramsci Internationalization is a really well-known fact, well established, especially known in some countries, some regions, in Argentina, of course, in America Latina in general, in the United States, United Kingdom, and in India. There is a famous historical school, Salvatore Studies, which apart more from a selective appropriation of Gramsci, and there are a series of disciplines in which Gramsci is recognized as classic. This is history, cultural studies, and also international relation, and then anthropology, political philosophy, of course, sociology, not so much like other disciplines. And for us, for our research, we selected it as a major case of posthumous, post-mortem consecration. And this is the issue: how can we account for this international circulation and consecration? Before seeing a series of materials, empirical materials, data, and also information useful for giving some first answer, I would like to show you just two things. That is, one is the kind of material which the Quaderno del Carcere, the prison notebooks, are really made. That is, they are really notebooks, no handwritten notebooks. The second one is, well, is Gramsci. The real Gramsci was not a very beautiful man. Was not. It was one. Yeah, he had a wife. He had also a sister. With whom he was also in very good relation, and maybe intellectual relation. He suffered from a series of illness, and this was part of his career in prison as a prisoner, but also as a person with problem. And that at the end was this one. These are four of the six original books drawn from the notebooks. But I would like also to underline the two other guys. One is Palmiro Togliatti, who has been the leader of the Communist Party just after Gramsci went in prison. He was Sardinian like Gramsci, friend of Gramsci, but also competitor of Gramsci. And he was the main guy responsible for the first edition of the prison notebooks. He was strongly linked, of course, not only to Communist Party, but also, we are talking of a period in which this was normal, to the Soviet party, Communist Party, and to the Soviet Union. The other guy is a man whose name is Felice Platone. Then you could think that he is a philosopher, but he was not a philosopher. He was the material editor of the prison notebooks. He was a journalist. He was a communist journalist very close to Gramsci, when Gramsci was still a politician, militant, and journalist before becoming the founder and one of the leading person of the Communist Party. This is the start of the Gramsci enterprise. It is the first edition of his major work, which is the Prison Notebooks. The structure of Gramscian work, I think, is something that we have to consider in order to try to understand how it was possible that his work and his Italian work was written in Italian became so successful and circulated so widely. It is important because I think that from this slide you can see how different it is from other kind of intellectual works. First of all, we have to distinguish between two different periods, pre-prison writing and prison writing. The pre-prison writing are mainly new papers, articles, and political intervention, and just one through essay that he was writing a kind of theoretical essay that he was writing just before becoming in prison, so he had to, it's an unfinished text. And then there are the letters, the private letters that he wrote before going in prison. It had been published just in the 90s, and so just after the success of Gramsci. Then there are the prison writings, the notebooks that we already mentioned, written between 1929 and 1935, with the two editions that I already mentioned. And then there are the letters, letters from prison. There are huge of them that have been published in a series of different editions since 1947 till still now are published new letters. Almost nothing of what we have seen was intended to be published. And this is an extract from the prison notebooks, to which Gramsci is not talking about himself. He's referring to Marx. And in general, when you are studying some author, and this is something that is considered a kind of preview of what could have happened. It is clear that the content of a posthumous work has to be taken with great discretion and caution, because it cannot be considered definitive, but only as material still being elaborated, still provision. And this is part one of the big issue that we want to start. The fact that some problems, some strong problems in the original works could become, in a certain way, resources for the international situation, which is the problem of the original work. One is the fragmentary character. There are really prison notebooks, notes, made of notes, a lot of notes, personal notes. And Gramsci intention, we can consider that the intention of Gramsci was, of course, was to write these notes with an aim, with an objective, to publish something later. Probably a history, a kind of social history, political history of intellectuals in Italy. This was his original project. But surely not in the form that we know then. And there is then another problem that has to do with the kind of intellectual work that Gramsci was pursuing. He was trying to figure out a different kind of Marxism, which is moving from historical materialism, but combining it with other sources, more Italian one. Benedetto Croce, the philosopher Benedetto Croce, was one of these sources, but a series of other, usually Italian, sometimes French thinkers. And in order to understand something about the social and political history of Italy. And all this was really approaches of thought. They are ideas nation, I will call them. There are is a thinking process that we can follow looking at the notebooks. And this means that there are real inconsistencies in the text. In fact, there is a huge debate about what really Gramsci had in mind when writing that note or another note, which kind of correlation would be with on different notebooks written in different years and so on. And then there is also the problem of censorship. And it is Gramsci was writing while in prison, knowing that that the texts were under some control, and this would account for a certain use of concept that is not consistent with the Marxist vocabulary. For example, he usually doesn't make use of the word class. It doesn't make use of the expression historical materialism, but uses social groupings, in English of course, gruppo sociale, aggregatos, and then he talks about, he writes about the philosophy of praxis, not historical materialism. And so also this has contributed to make the work of Gramsci a different kind of Marxist thing. The point that I want to underline is that, according to me, according to us, all these issues, these features of the work are at the same time object of reason for continuous debate among intellectuals and also politicians and also politically engaged intellectuals since the 50s at least, and could account together with other factors for the circulation of Gramsci works, for the circulation of his ideas and for the traveling of ideas and text and the selection of the text, variously arranged, variously interpreted, variously combined. And this is what we will try to document with a series of data, at a certain point very, very fast. But before starting with this, just still a quotation, in a certain way, quotation that is totally expected in a certain way. These two are all his father, considered together with Raymond Williams, Hogarth, E.P. Thompson, father of British cultural studies, and Jamaican intellectual of Marxist ideas, who discovered, together with Williams, surely Gramsci relatively early, as still editor a New Left Review, still also New Reasoner, was the name of the Left Review, when they first published, translated a piece by Gramsci. And this is what Stuart Hall said about Gramsci influence on him. And I have just underlined and read two sentences, two passages that I think that are useful for my presentation. The first is that Gramsci, Stuart Hall, like a lot of other scholars working on Gramsci and thinking with Gramsci and who contributed to the circulation of Gramsci's thought, first read him in translation in the early 60s. The second is a point that in a certain way has already emerged. It is Gramsci has been useful in a certain way to rethink Marx, to read in another manner, in another way, a Marx that was risking to become a kind of totem. It is a kind of religious affair. There were a quasi-religious body of dogma. And this is something that, of course, is already well known for the case of British cultural studies and in general British New Left, but I think that could be generalized also. Of course, there are peculiarities, local peculiarities, and Gramsci has been used and certainly in a different way, but this is one of the main reasons of the success of Gramsci. It is Gramsci helped in different parts of the world to take to cope with a tradition, a Marxist tradition, which was risking to become dogmatic, especially, as you know, through the Stalinist reading in general, what was happening in the Soviet Union. The question we started from is how it is possible to account for this huge circulation, and this posthumous, post-mortem consecration of an Italian scholar, and just what I added is notice after listening to Giselle paper this morning. There are languages that are central and other languages that are marginal, peripheral. Of course, Italian is a peripheral, marginal language, because at least semi-peripheral, yes. Semi-peripheral, not central language. And when an Italian scholar or an Italian writer encounter has such as, there is always a question in Italy, how it was possible. The last one was Roberto Saviano, how it was possible that an Italian book could circulate on Umberto Eco with Il nome della rosa more than 30 years ago. It was strange. And Gramsci is the same. He's one of those Italians that had, from a certain way, we can say, an aspect that not easy to expect, had a huge success. In order to answer this question, this is our intellectual move. At least at this stage of our research, to make an analysis, original analysis of a data source, database, which is also a source for us, which is extraordinary from a certain point of view, and still to be used, at least in the manner in which we are using. It is original on the database, not on the website where the data are available to reader and scholar, but for asking very specific queries. And we have acquired the original database. The original database, as you can see, is a very huge one. It includes references to more than 19,000 documents published in 42 countries in 28 languages, and the kind of information of data that are available are, of course, the title, the author, also the editor, if it is edition, the publisher, the country of publication, the language, year of publication, type of document, we will see in the next slide what that means, and also the subject, which is something like the keywords that have been given by the people who is working on the, we can skip it, going on the bibliography. Just to mention, because he was the guy, he was an American historian, John Campbell, who was the guy behind this bibliographical source, which is for us both a bibliography, a source, but also an object of research, just to want to recall. This is the distribution for document type. You can see that there are articles and periodicals that account for 30% of the database, and books devoted entirely or mostly to Gramsci, including books authored by Gramsci in the various languages. I will skip at this point because I want to show you a series of, at this point, of information, of data. This is a series now of maps that document in time the spread, the circulation of Gramsci text, books, or also writings, could also be in newspaper and periodicals, translated, or also in Italian, but of course you can see Italy and the other. Italy is very small, as you can see. This is the situation before the publication of the first books. And you can see that in Russia, it was already just a political issue. Some of his articles and political intervention had been already translated in the 20s, when he was a member of the I don't recall what was exactly, probably the Comintern. I don't recall if it was exactly that. No, it was possible because anyway, it was one of those committee of the Communist Party that collect people from the different national Communist Party, was the representative of Italy. And this is very, very, very small data. You can see it's 16 texts in Italy. Many of the articles in periodicals were not signed by Gramsci. That is being reconstructed after post-mortem process of consecration has been attributed the name of the author otherwise. So at the beginning this was the situation. Just 15 years after, the situation was this, with Italy is point with 68 texts, followed by Russia, but still because of the early translation, and then Argentina, already the beginning, was one of the very, the first, France also, and then a series of others. That is the situation 20 years later. Italy always is very huge, the publication and the number. Russia still second one, but then Japan was discovered an explosion of interest for Gramsci in the 60s. And Argentina, Brazil was the Latin American that is starting too. And then there are also a few, the Czech Republic, Germany, and Spain, and France. Then I will say very fast manner something about this edition. This is the situation still after 20 years. At this point we have no time to follow country by country, even in the first position, but just the situation. Now, this is the current situation. 673 titles among articles in journal, collection of writings, book edition in 30 languages and 42 countries in 4 continents. Just Africa is not included, even if there is, we have still to solve a question. It seems that there is an edition of a selection of prison notebooks that is, could be in Cairo, so is Egyptian, even if it is not clear. There are different sources, sometimes say that it is not Egyptian, sometimes say that it is. Anyway, in Arabian it is mainly in Lebanon. Beirut is the original publisher of. This is the situation at this point now. It is all the number of books. It is books. So how it is possible, all these books? Because, as I told you, it's a fragment. It's a series of fragments that could be taken and combined differently in anthology, but also in selection. Sometimes combining selection fragments of a prison notebook, sometimes putting together prison notebooks selected with periodicals, articles, maybe in pre-prison writings, and then also letters. So there is this very huge kind of puzzle, a big puzzle of what is fragments. Anyway, not looking in the content, but just the item. This is the situation. In Italy, 178 books authored by Gramsci, and then this is the series, the ranking, etc. Spain, Germany, Brazil, Mexico, France, Argentina, Japan, and so on, the United States. I have no time at this point to try to explain what is happening, but I suppose you say so, right? Okay, I have less than half of my presentation. In any case, this is one of the main theoretical, analytical passages that I will stop on this slide. So if there is a question, this will be on the part. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a presentation which provides empirical evidence of what the international canonization process could look like. So, Gustavo.
Marcus, as we have told, talking before, it's important to take into account the transnational point of view of some of the trends of this international consecration. you know, for example, that in the case of the Spanish, well, I see you have graphics by language, because it's really Spanish is the most representative language in the consideration of Gramsci. And if you took the case of Argentina and Mexico, you will see that it's the same group of intellectuals of Argentine origin from Córdoba, Socialico, that made really a very an international, an intellectual international think tank to import in Spanish language not only Gramsci but really the heterodox Marxist Italian thinking very early from the end of the 50s. And the beginning of the publishing and diffusion by Mexico was in the time when these Argentine intellectuals had to exile in '76. And well, they began with the journal Past and Present, the version of Argentinian version. And it's important to contrast also with the case of Cuba, because in Cuba you have only two. Though there is a struggle within the left intellectual international field, political intellectual field in Latin America to comprehend these movements and sharing of projects.
Yes, good. Thanks. Yeah, as you already know, because we talk about there is one of there is the pathways of the publishing houses in a certain way, with their split and merging and so on. That in a certain way follow also this intellectual group of intellectuals traveling.
I could see the switch from Édition Sociale to the Édition Sociale was the Communist Party.
Yeah, all the first publications.
The consecration process is visible in publishing. Fernanda.
Thank you. Marco, I would affirm what Giselle said about the Italian being semi-territory, just because for many years I worked on José Carlos Mariátegui, which is an intellectual, a Peruvian intellectual that was said to be influenced by Gramsci. I think I tried to show it wasn't like that, because he never knew the real Gramsci that you're talking about. He just knew an Italian editor from L'Ordine Nuovo. But against what you're saying, Gustavo, I think that the importing of Gramsci was way before in Argentina and Latin America through the communist parties. So my question for Marco would be this. I believe we have like two different important streams of the circulation of Gramsci in Latin America. One is coming from the Communist Party and these thematical organizations, notebooks, maybe starting with Cuaderno de Cárcel, how is that called? The notebooks the cartas, I mean the letters, I'm sorry, by Héctor Agosti in Argentina, which is the Communist Party line. And in the other line I find Gregorio Berman, which is in the Institute of Gramsci, this first book before Héctor Agosti in 1958. And that is like more an intellectual reception. And I think in Argentina, I find it very clearly, and in Latin America, because the other reception, starting with Berman, goes on with what Gustavo was mentioning, which are the Argentinian Gramscian people that were in Mexico. So I want to ask you if this is something that internationally you could find also, these two lines.
Yes. Thanks for the question that permitted me to say something more. Yes, there are. I am perfectly agree with you, and it is something that I think that for what I have seen till now happens almost everywhere except in Italy. In Italy, of course, it was at the beginning was a patrimony of the Communist Party. This is the reason why in Italy it could be strange for you to be. There is no sociologist, it is not part of the social science background of Gramsci. It is part of the history, for historians of political thought, not necessarily now Marxist historians, but it is a history of political ideas. It's something that has to do study with a certain distance. It's not an intellectual resource for us. In other countries there was this double track. Also in Germany was very apparent, but in France also, and you can say also for the situation for the publishing, two publishing houses that are well engaged and that can account for the spread of Gramsci in France. One is, as Giselle said, the Social, the publishing house of the French Communist Party, like a series of other, Lawrence Wishart, which was the publisher in English in England, in the United Kingdom, of all Gramsci, early Gramsci publication. And the same publication were published in the United States by international publisher, which was the publisher of the Communist Party of the United States. And but in France, like in Italy, in a certain way, even if it is a bit complicated, after a while it was Gallimard who started to publish. It was at the end of the 60s, start of the 70s. And then it was all 70 and still of the... Consider that Robert Paris, or Robert Paris, I don't know, Robert Paris, who is the editor of the French edition of Prison Notebooks, was not welcomed by the Communist Party and also by the Instituto Gramsci, because it was considered too out from the line, certainly. But it is an interesting point. Einaudi, who now is considered, for who of us knows something about the Italian culture, Italian publishing landscape, now he is one of the most prestigious general publisher. But when he started, he was on the left and on party, because he was clearly anti-fascist and linked to a series of communist intellectuals. And this is the reason why it was the first to publish.
Okay, there are Patrick, and then Jean-Louis, and okay, maybe we gather the questions, and please keep it short.
It's skipping because it's already done.
It's okay, so Jean-Louis?
Okay, it's a question, it's not a statement. It's a beautiful case in the sociology of text. So can we identify the editorial work that was made by Togliatti or his collaborators to, of course, transform these manuscripts into text?
Yes, it should be still
We shall gather the questions?
Yes, series of questions. Okay.
Yes, yeah, so
Very brief, just a suggestion, it's very interesting. It would be interesting to complement the data with Google Books and Google Ngrams, because I just did it, and we see, as you said, in Soviet Union from 1920, 1950, then a new peak in the 60s, 65 for the Italians, the first peak in 75 for the French. So there is a movement of the peak interest in 65 in the Soviet Union, 75 and it can be linked to those, because since Google Books, it's based on all the mentioned in the books in all the languages. So it's complex.
Yes, it is.
The question is linked to what Eva talked about the Soviet Union. You went very quickly through the graphics, but I found it, just with a fast glimpse, I found it bizarre to separate until the 1990s Russia, and to separate also Croatia, Serbia, Slovenia, and possibly Bosnia and Herzegovina. I don't know if you have it, but how do you justify this separation of countries that are in Yugoslavia until the 1990s?
Yugoslavia was.
So it would change your results very much if you had Yugoslavia, for example.
No, yes. Okay, I have to say this. We use just because of technical. So we use the map, the current map. So we have to consider the data in split in situation before the collapse of the Soviet Union. And we have the data, but not the.
the data
are already separated, but the map cannot do justice to that.
It's 1990.
Yes, but the map is always the same. The map is always the same. We didn't manage to have a map with the situation.
You can just add and say that you would have 5 for Yugoslavia.
And Yugoslavia is split. Croatia, Slovenia, of course, the data were originally, but there is also the town. So there is Zagreb, Yugoslavia, and we gave a new.
I have some question about another repatriation of Gramsci in liberal and even conservative camps, and how it's possible and it's necessary to some kind of academic neutralization before this appropriation in any non-leftist camps.
Yeah.
Marco, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, that's very speedy. should be possible, even if consider that the critical edition of the 1975 was done also to demonstrate, to show that the kind of editorial choice done by Togliatti were not so biased. That is, in certain way they want to restore the original text in order to make a comparison possible. Of course, all this happens also
Thank you.
behind the war of the Communist Party. And the other question, I think that there is already a literature about the appropriation on the left, on the right, from the right of Gramsci, and in a certain way it was in part appropriation, in part it is considered as a strong, one of the strongest leftist thinker present. But I think that could be the path to follow is this ambivalent of the original text that could be read differently, and also the concept as hegemony could be used, of course, as political and intellectual tools.
Just a very short comment of the fact that Africa has now translations because the text circulates in the colonial language, French and English, and also Lebanon is the center of the Arab area. And about Italy, I would say that for SSH it's more semi-central because it's one of the rare languages from which there are translations. The SSH go less than French and German, but still.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to hear Barbara Gröning, also from, she's working in the team with Marco Santoro for the INTERCO project since the beginning with us. And she's working on Hannah Arendt. She will speak about Becoming Hannah Arendt, the reception of a Jewish intellectual woman in Germany and Italy. So now we have a more in-depth comparative approach.
Good evening. I will talk today about the reception of Hannah Arendt in Germany and in Italy. I will try to, and I will try to trace different patterns of institutionalization, academic and political institutionalization of Hannah Arendt in the two countries by starting, however, from a very similar historical background. We can here identify three breakpoints of the history of the social science humanities in Italy and Germany. 1945 strategies, that is the new beginning of these disciplines in the two countries, and also the question of how overcoming a difficult past, that is the dictatorship, the fascist dictatorship in Germany and in Italy. The second point is the 1968, related to the student movements and also to the Marxist hegemony, the Verdian hegemony, until the mid of the 70s, the crisis of Marxism in the two countries, and then a second phase that is the so-called post-Marxist theories and intellectual groups, and emerging also in parallel of the category of the political. And then the third breakpoint is the 1989, that it is the end of the Cold War for the two countries, but obviously for Germany a further meaning, that is the question of the German unification. And these three breakpoints we can also identify three different phases of Hannah Arendt's reception in the two countries that are also on first impression very similar. The first one was dominant the concept of Hannah Arendt of totalitarianism in the two countries, when it's also dominated liberal conservative interpretation of Hannah Arendt. In the second phase, better at after the mid of the 70s, that is from 1968 to the mid of the 70s, both in Germany and in Italy, is Hannah Arendt not so present in the debate, not so present in the public publication, also in the intellectual field, because of the dominance of Marxist theory. And with the increase of the Marxism in both of the countries, emerged also, and with the emergence of the category of the political, Hannah Arendt become important also for reference intellectual point. And then after 1989 start, we can say really rebirth and institutionalization of Hannah Arendt and also popularization of Hannah Arendt in the two countries. That is what we can look at. This is the first impression that we can see similar patterns, but in every case, what I try to do is to also to search for difference within these two countries, even if it seems that they have a similar pattern, similar reception phases. And we can also, this is what my research is based on quantitative analysis. I analyzed publication on Hannah Arendt for Germany monographs, articles in journal and volumes, paragraphs in books, featured theses, and textbooks and handbooks. For Italy, it was not possible to find data on textbooks and handbooks, only through experts, and also not data on paragraphs in books, because of the structure of the database. And then also qualitative analysis in the interviews with experts of Hannah Arendt. Well, the first difference that we can remark about the reception of Hannah Arendt and in Germany and Italy over time, I hope this could be, regard the distribution in the different disciplines. The data start in Italy and Germany always about at the beginning of the 80s until 2014, there are the collected data, and there is the data in percentage. What we can remark for main differences. The first one regards that in Germany there is also gender study and media study, GSMS. There is since the mid of the 90s that also received Hannah Arendt's theories, while in Italy the feminist interpretation of Hannah Arendt is within the political philosophy or history of political thought. Then the second difference regards the educational science, ES, that is quite in existence in Italy and in Germany is relevant. And I think that it also related to the history of educational science that was an evolution, we can say, of pedagogy, and was the shift in the 60s from pedagogy to educational science in Germany. That was a critical position towards the traditional concept of education or of Bildung that was in the academy before the 60s, from the positivism strike to the revolution, to the movement of the student in the 60s. And it's important because educational science in the 70s was very open to invent new curriculum. And in this sense, it was Hannah Arendt started to receive also within educational science. And the first textbook on Hannah Arendt was written from educational scientists in 1984, for example. The third difference is related to the literature, that in Germany is also common in the last years to cultural studies. Also there are these two this proximity to literary studies and cultural studies with regard to Hannah Arendt. And there are this important Hannah Arendt in German for Germanists for two reasons. The first one regards the translation of Hannah Arendt's books. That is that first of all there are some books or some article or some essay that was written from Hannah Arendt directly in German. For example, all the publication before 1950. And then a lot of some of her books, of her main books, was also edited by Hannah Arendt. She looked on the translation. And then there are two versions, what the Germans say, of Hannah Arendt's book, a version, an English version and a German version. For example, Vitaktiva, where the use of the German language is related also to the quotation of intellectual, cultural important view of intellectual of the German Jewish tradition. And the second reason is related to also, yes, always to the Jewish culture. There are a lot of books in this in the 80s published from Germany that regard the Jewish culture and Hannah Arendt. More general, not specific on the language, on analysis of the linguistic analysis of our books. The first important, more important difference regards but the difference distribution between philosophy and political science. And for Germany, there are more studies, more publication on Hannah Arendt in political science than in philosophy. And political science is not present in Italy. We have history of political thought that means it's very near to political philosophy. And then we have a lot of the main authors that quote on Hannah Arendt are philosophers, political philosopher, but also theoretical philosopher and moral philosopher and so on. That is related what I tried to do. If we look at Germany, this political science in Germany is since 1945 is political philosophy since 1945, but until the mid of the 1970s, political philosophy very centered within political science. And then what's also interesting is political education. That is also related to the development of political education within the political science in Germany, is also related to the student movements. So it was also in this sense the curricula in political education very open to innovation and to new orders. And in Italy, the situation until the mid of the 70s is very different. There is a traditional Italian culture of philosophy that include history of philosophy and moral philosophy mainly, and then political science very influenced by American studies. And then we have until the mid of the 70s philosophy or right that was a professor with chair, and then there was teaching of political philosophy and history of political thought that was normally covered by assistant of the professors. And in fact, we have until from after 1965 the first chair in political philosophy, and until the mid of the 70s only one chair of political philosophy in Sardinia from England. And the second difference is that I want to analyze regard the content, the issues and concepts in the two countries. I here collect all the contents, all the issues that I found in the title of books, paragraph, and so on. And here there are the percentage with respect to the total of the volume. And for Germany are 639. And we can see that in Germany, the first group of concepts regard institutional concepts, also democracy related to the constitution, democracy related to state of right, and so on. The second one is totalitarianism, and then what is also interesting is there are a lot of representative books, items on Germany, related to Germany culture, but also Germany politics and so on. And other two interesting issues are Jews, the relations between Jewish intellectual and Hannah Arendt, and also political theme, Sionismus, and also the other ethics, responsibility. And why they are important, I will try to just go there. They are important because these issues are central within the intellectual field of Germany since after 1945. There are some authors that speak about discursive democratization of Germany after 1945 that are related to the German question. The German question is the question of the two states until 1990 or 1989, and after the German question of one state also, of the reunification. And then the German question is also related to the work on the National Socialist regime, and so strongly related to the Jewish question. Another important aspect of the intellectual field in Germany after 1945, we have until after 1945, sorry, we have until the 80s or until the end of the 70s. I simplified, but two currencies: the liberal conservative, that is related to the concept of national state and also totalitarianism theory, and the left liberals, like Habermas, for example, that are related to the question of constitution and political institutional identification. And there are some authors that spoke also for non-German German identity, that is a German identity that is constructed on political institutional identification, not on a cultural German tradition. And after the 70s, at the end of the 70s, we had also the emerging of the new alternative left, also the Green Party, the Green Movement, that related to the concept of republicanism and of civic society or of civic republicanism. And this third groups that specifically will adopt at the beginning Hannah Arendt, also so-called the group of Arendtian. And if you look on in Italy, the constitution in Italy, we have first of all political theory, also book that regard Hannah Arendt political theory or the concept of the political, and then philosophical theory. Another third group is time, memory, narrating. There's also a concept that are related, and that and what's also related with the concept of word plurality. And this and the third and the fourth concept group of concepts is mainly used by the feminist interpretation, Italian feminist intellectuals. Well, again with the German intellectual and Arendt, we have some example of intellectuals that wrote on Hannah Arendt, that also participated to the important debate in the public sphere on Germany. Historical debate, for example, Habermas, Nolte, and Fest, Hans Monkens, Sondheim, and also Brumlik, that participated historical debate, and also adopting with different position, also Hannah Arendt's theory, associated her with, also in different times, continuously in the times, associating her either or on a nation-state concept, or on a constitutional concept, or for later for the alternative left, like Brumlik or like Baron, that was a dissident of the GDR, on the concept of republicanism. And yeah, I would like to go to the conclusion. We can, on the basis of what I tried to illustrate, we can identify two different beginnings, maybe case or rebirth of Hannah Arendt's reception in the mid of the 70s. Even if there are, in both the countries, Italy and Germany, there are two groups of post-Marxist intellectuals that adopt again Hannah Arendt to reconstruct to Hannah Arendt. They do that with different, we can say, with different goals. In Germany, it is more related to also the transformation of political field. We can say the transformation of political field, and also a new voice within the public debate on the German question, and on the German question. And in Italy, on the contrary, it is a mean, and it's a research to legitimate, after the crisis of Marxism, to legitimate not only to find a new legitimation to the link to the left intellectuals, but also to find legitimation to the political philosophy. And after 1980, in fact, also the political philosophy started to become more important within the academic field. And the last slide I want to show regards about just of the organization of Arendt's reception of the people that work on Hannah Arendt in Germany. Many people may work on Hannah Arendt in Germany. We can see always in Germany there is a kind of institutionalization of Hannah Arendt's theories, in the sense that in 1993 there is the foundation of Hannah Arendt Institute für Terrorismusforschung in Dresden that was granted from dissident of the GDR. Also this is the symbolic foundation of this institute, but in every case is what is important is also related to the regional parliament of the Saxony. And it is so conservative, liberal conservative. We have then in 1994 the foundation of Hannah Arendt Prize for Prize for Political Thought, that was related to the promoter Heinrich Böll-Stiftung, that is related to the Green Party. And then there is on the academic level, we find two milieux, we can say also Frankfurt am Main, that is related to the link liberal interpretation of Hannah Arendt, related to the constitutional concept. On the other side, the Freie Universität Berlin, that's more related to the alternative left. And so this milieu, there are people that study Hannah Arendt, but they didn't really construct a network. The only network that is quite systematically is the Hannah Arendt Net journal, online journal. If you look at Italy, here we can see there is a network, a lot of cross line between different people and 3 or 4 universities that are centered in the reception of Hannah Arendt, but most of all there are also related to some journals, and some of the journals are Centaro and most of all Filosofia Politica, which was founded in 1930.